Hello everyone, this is Josh from Whiskers and Wrenches. We are back at it again with the old Ford F-150 that we bought a little bit ago. As you can tell, I've got a hood full of oils and everything like that. We got motor oil, transmission stop leak, we got a oil filter, brake fluid, rear end fluid, transfer case fluid, all that fun stuff. We're going to get this thing serviced and ready to go for winter because there is snow on the horizon on my weather app. So I've kind of got to get this thing ready for the winter. Let's get right into it. Well, first things first, I'm going to do the rear end fluid, make sure it's full. I can hear you guys laughing at me right now, wondering why I'm not doing this in my shop. Well, it's because I am lazy and my Crown Vic is still up on jack stands, as it has been for the last year. I've got the rear end all tore apart, doing some work on that thing, and it is not ready to move and is taking up my only bay in the garage right now. So I am stuck in the gravel driveway right now. Come on. Hey, look at that. Fill plug came right out, and we do have fluid in there. It's not in the best of shape. Pretty grody, if I am honest. I was hoping it would be in a little bit better shape now. It's not the end of the world, but it's not perfect. I'm going to go get a drain pan. I didn't expect this thing to be actually full. I expected it to be a little bit low because it is kind of wet on the back end side of it. So I'm going to go get a drain pan. We might just pop off this axle cover itself and put a new gasket on it because I do have gasket maker and I have RTB and everything like that. And if I'm here, I might as well do it.
Now, this is where I make a little voiceover because I just realized now I didn't really say what I plan to do with this truck in this episode. I just plan on getting this truck ready for winter. So I'm going to do the basic maintenance and preventative maintenance things like changing the oil, changing my diff fluid, checking my transfer case fluid, checking my tire pressures, checking my engine air filter, checking my brake fluid, my power steering fluid, all that fun things, and replacing where necessary. I did check the transfer case fluid off screen, as I touched on a little bit later, but I dipped my finger into the fill hole. It was right where it needed to be. The fluid itself smelled and looked good. There was no reason for me to change it, so I did skip over that in this episode, but that is something you do want to do, especially if you plan to drive on something during winter. You want to make sure your tires are good. You want to make sure all your fluids are good and clean and up to date because fluids are cheap. Engines, axles, transmissions are not cheap, and especially if you're driving them in the winter, you don't want to be stranded in the middle of nowhere because you skipped out on 20-30 bucks worth of oil. So we're going to get into it here. We're going to go through all the different things that I wanted to check over and change on this truck.
Well, let's give her a couple taps. Oh yeah, there she is. Oh yeah. That's very brown. That is no bueno. It's an open diff and it's very, very brown. I mean, it doesn't smell horrible, but it's a little bit browner than I hoped it would be. Let's go get some brake cleaner and scrape this thing up and give it some new fluid, why don't we? I'm gonna go get some little scraper, some sandpaper. We'll sand that old thing down, probably make a gasket for it. I'll show you guys that in a second here. A little bit of steel wool here, and we'll just kind of got some gasket maker on there all gooped up. Let's get back under there, clean up the underside a little bit, and we'll get this diff cover back on. Well, that's all sealed up. We're going to let this thing sit overnight before we fill it back full of fluid. But I'm going to wipe off this drain plug here, clean it all up.
Alright, this is where I do a little bit of post-recording editing and updates. As you can see here, the footage was completely dark. It got dark really, really quick as I was doing that rear end. I forgot how late in the year it is and how quickly it gets dark after 3:30, 4 o'clock. By this time, it was already like 4:30. I'd gotten off of work by about 30 minutes, and I didn't realize how quickly it was going to get dark, and you guys really can't see anything. So I'm just going to explain a few things I did off camera here. I explained it to the camera, but my face wasn't even in the camera. You can't see anything. I said I'm going to leave the diff cover overnight, and then in the morning we will come back and fill it. And we're going to move up to the front diff cover. The front diff has a actual drain on the diff itself and a fill plug. It does not have to be split apart to drain it like the rear diff covers. So we're gonna drain that front diff. We're gonna pop the fill plugs and the drain plugs off of it, drain it, and then we will pick up back in the morning when it is back bright outside and you guys can actually see something. Well, as you can see here, I did pop the drain cover off for the front diff. You guys can't see it too well. I didn't realize how dark it really was, but it looked like engine oil that had about 3,500 to 4,000 miles on it. It was still clear, but it was starting to get pretty dark. I probably didn't even really need to change it, honestly, but I figured I was there. I had the oil. I might as well do it.
Well, just get the sun out of my eyes. Well, last night it was getting extremely cold and extremely dark, and I couldn't see anything anymore, so figured I'd call it, and we'll just get a good start on it in the morning. And we are back. Now I'm still pumping up the front differential. I've got the tube of grease there with the pumper in it. It was pretty cold last night, so it was really goopy, so it was really taking a lot of effort to get it up in there. So I'm going to try my best to get that filled the rest of the way up, and then we'll work on the transfer case, and then do the engine oil. Thankfully, the engine oil should be pretty darn easy, but the rest of this is just a pain in the butt. Get you guys situated so you can kind of see what I'm doing here.
Well, this turned out to be a extremely annoying task. I brought oh my goodness, I got the hiccups. Brought the gear oil in last night, hoping to have it warm up a little bit, because the night before when it was really dark, what you guys couldn't see, I was outside probably 10-15 minutes pumping this gear oil up into this front differential, but it was just not flowing very well at all. It was getting my fingers were numb, it was hard to push, everything like that. It was extremely annoying, and I spent another 20-25 minutes in the morning pumping it just to get it up there. It was not fun, and in this little coming segment here, you're going to hear a lot of beeps and a lot of bangs of where I'm having to censor things, because I spent, no joke, about 30 to 35 minutes just pumping this grease up into the front differential. It was not fun in any way, shape, or form, but after we get this differential fixed up here, we're going to go into changing the oil, getting that thing all sorted, then we'll move on to other fun things that we got to do with this truck.
Oh my god, I think I finally have it fill. And it just really tried to some fluid into my face. That was awesome. Yep, it's full. Thanks. Holy that only took like an hour. Oh, I need to like sit in the sun for a minute and just bask in my accomplishment.
Well, to balance all that negativity out, I'm just going to show a video of my dogs being cute and playing around to balance all that out. Enjoy.
Well, now that we got that fluid drain, as you can tell, it is gross. This is the front diff and rear diff fluid. I've got a container here just that I put my waste oil in, and then I spray the underside of my winter rigs with an old school weed sprayer just to keep the rust from getting to it too bad. We're going to dump this into here. And now that we got the front diff done, we're going to move back over to the rear diff now that that gasket has been sitting overnight, and refill that back diff. Well, now that I'm up under here, I've learned something extremely kind of annoying. So Valvoline is kind of known for their easy pour cans, you know, being a little bit bigger than everybody else so you can pour oil and everything like that. But for some reason, they did the same thing to their gear oil. So this little thing will not screw on. So I'm just going to have to kind of freehand it. Valvoline, count your days. There's literally no reason for this. Everybody's going to be using one of these pumps to put gear oil in. The only reason you did this is so that you can sell your own pump.
Now, as you saw there, Valvoline did definitely screw all of us over there. It's not very cool. I went through about 3 different pumps trying to figure out one that would work. The white one I used for the front end just fell inside the Valvoline can. Another red one I bought would not work because the gear oil was too thick for it. And this last one I bought still did not screw the whole way onto it, but it was thick enough where it did pump the fluid up there. This was starting to get me angry, but I had one thing that would cool me off.
I wish the Buick was out here. I'd take it for a drive. Clear my head in the vert. Oh, hold on. It's overflowing now. I've used literally like 99%. I probably have like a quarter of a quart left. Well, now we finally got that rear end fluid filled up. I had to make about 4 different runs to the parts store to get a different pump. Now that we got that done, I am going to skip on the transfer fluid or the transfer case fluid itself. I popped off the fill plug and I dip my finger in there. The fluid itself is still red. It smells cherry. That is just full of transmission fluid. It's not full of gear oil or anything like that. And it looks in amazing shape. So I'm not going to worry about that. We're going to do the oil change now, like I said. And then I'm going to do a power steering flush as well. The brake fluid looks good. I checked that. It looks like it's been flushed or changed or, just meticulously maintained pretty recently because it's not dark. It's still bright. It's still clear, everything like that. So we're not going to worry about that. On the bottom of your oil fill cap, as you can see here, this thing's got a fair bit of milkshake on there. Now, this doesn't necessarily mean you have a blown head gasket. This could just mean moisture's been sitting in there. If you have a vehicle that's sitting for a long time, it can get moisture buildup in the oil pan, and then when you run it, this is what happens. It could be an indication of a blown head gasket, but with the way this thing runs, I don't think it is a blown head gasket. I did look into the coolant reservoir earlier because it did pop this off when I was buying the truck. The oil or the coolant itself isn't burned. It doesn't bubble. You can put your hand over it. There's not any pressure coming back out of it. So I don't think it's a blown head gasket. I think just this thing sat around for so long that it just got moisture up into the oil and it's just ready for a change. I'm going to wipe everything down and we'll get up under the car and change it now. Well, as you can see here, here's the oil we took out of it. And as you can tell, it does have a little bit of milky in here, but it's nothing, really, really bad. I really do think this is just condensation from the truck sitting from a long time. Now I've rolled it back off the ramps here so that when I fill it, I can make sure it's level, make sure the levels are correct. I'm going to put the drain or the fill plug back on the front axle. I had it up like this when I filled it, so I knew a little bit was going to come running out. So I left that fill plug off of it. Now that it's back at a level surface, I'm going to let it run out a little bit, put the fill plug back on it, and we'll put some oil back in the thing and fire up and take it for a test drive. All right, now that we got the oil drained, I put the fill plug back on the front differential after I got it level off the ramps, let all the extra fluid run out of it. Got the new oil filter on there, got the old oil out, got the drain plug put back on, rolled it, like I said, off the ramp, so now it's level. We can put new oil in it. I'm putting the first cord is going to be this Lucas oil stabilizer. It helps with old worn out engines like this one, helps quiet down lifter noises, all that stuff. It's just good. It stops leaks. It's just good old stuff to run through old worn out trucks. I got SA5W30, actual Ford motor blend stuff. I run this in all my Ford vehicles. If anybody knows about Ford vehicles, probably the people that built them. Good hack to make sure you get everything out of that Lucas oil is take a quart of oil, dump it in there, swish it around, and dump it back out. That Lucas stuff is pretty darn thick, so it takes a long time to run out. And you do want to get everything out of there that you possibly can because that stuff ain't cheap. So I'm going to dump this into that container, switch it around a little bit, dump it into there, then fill it the rest of the way up. As we're waiting to get that the whole way down, you can see here, power steering fluid, it doesn't look too bad at all. I dipped it into there, see if it was really dark. If this stuff gets really dark, you do want to change it. Your power steering pump will eat itself if it gets bad. But as you can see on the tip of my finger, that stuff is pretty clear. A lot of people just use transmission fluid in a lot of power steering pumps. That is something you can do. I always recommend just using power steering fluid itself. But if you're in a pinch, you can use automatic transmission fluid. Like I said, a lot of people do that. Alrighty, this oil is extremely clear, so I don't know how well you can see it, but we're about 3/4 up the dipstick. I'm going to add a little bit more from our 5-quart jug, and then we're going to start this thing up, let it run for a second, and then shut it back off so we can check the oil again. Come on. Camera won't focus very well, but that far left gauge on the top there is our oil pressure. We're going to start this thing up. For a minute, it is probably going to have no oil pressure as it fills the oil pump and everything like that. But after about 5 seconds, it should go away. If it does not go away, make sure you are full of oil. You do not want to run, your engine without oil pressure. See right there, we're out of oil pressure, out of oil pressure, still out of oil pressure. Should start climbing here in just a second. And there it is. We've got oil pressure back. Our gauge is showing where it should be. There's no tapping from the motor. Already now that we had that thing started up, and we do have oil pressure showing on our gauge. I'm going to, once again, I took the fill cap back off of there. Make sure you do take your funnel out, put your fill cap back on before you start it. I took the fill cap back off, put the oil funnel back in there because I'm sure we are going to need a little bit of oil. We're going to take the dipstick back out. We're going to wipe it off a few times because now that this thing started up and all that oil circulated, it is going to read a little bit weird. Alrighty, now I don't know how well you guys can see it, but we are at the very bottom of our cross hex. We're about right here. Before we started it, we were right up here. So as you can tell, whenever your oil filter fills up all your oil lines, it does suck some oil out of it. This is a very important step. Make sure after you run your motor for a second, it does build oil pressure, that you shut it off and check your oil again because it is going to be a little bit lower than what you started with. Going to give that one more splash, just about like that, a funnel fill. We're going to let that sit again to the bottom of the motor, get to where the oil pan is, everything like that. And then we'll check the oil, make sure it's all good. And then once we start it up, we are going to look underneath whenever it is running. Now that we have oil pressure and everything like that, we have confirmed on the gauges. We are filling it back up, make sure we're at I normally aim for about the 3/4, just a little bit under the cross hex. You do not want to overfill your oil, but I always like leaving it to the top-ish. That way, if you do have a small oil leak, you have a little bit of leeway. You're not leaking, a quarter oil out, then you're completely out of oil and your motor's going to lock up. You have a little bit of leeway there if your motor does leak a little bit of oil. Alrighty, I did confirm that we do have oil pressure on the gauges. Now I'm going to crawl up under here and look for anything, obviously, that is leaking. Now, thankfully, I don't see any obvious drips, anything like that. I know the camera angle isn't going to be the best for you guys. It's kind of hard getting the phone up under here, but I'll show you guys the best I possibly can. Now, as we see up under here, I don't see any obvious dripping. We want to look at our oil filter housing itself, which is up in there. I don't know if you guys can see it, but we got a white oil filter up there. I don't see any obvious drips or things, anything like that. We do obviously have a little drip there, but that is residual from when we changed the oil. I don't see any drips in the back of our oil pan itself, so we're looking pretty good up under here. Looks like we're going to clean things out of the way, then we're going to take it on a little test drive. Alrighty, we took it on a quick ride around the block. I'm going to check the oil one more time here. Make sure we're nice full of nice clean oil. And look at that, we are right on the money. We're about 3/4 of the way up that fill, which is exactly where I want to be. Not the end of the world, but these battery connections are looking a little bit older. I'm going to take some steel wool, polish them off, put some dielectric grease is what I was looking for. You see right there, waterproof dielectric grease. That's what the term I was looking for that I couldn't think of. Take a little bit of this stuff, polish it as best as I can. It's not going to be perfect, as I said. This really isn't that bad. It's just a little bit of surface oxidation. So I'm going to polish it up a little bit of steel wool, halfway decently. And then we're going to cover this thing in the dielectric grease, call it good. Now I do have some steel wool here. Now, the correct way would be to pull all these connections apart, polish them, do a battery brush, clean up all this oxidation, everything off of it. But as I said earlier, these connections aren't really that bad, so I'm just going to take some steel wool, polish the outside of them, get most of that oxidation off of there, cover it up in some grease, and we'll call it good. And you don't got to be scared with this stuff. This stuff is not going to hurt anything. It's going to do the exact opposite. It's going to help things. So don't be scared to get a good glob on here and cover up all these connections. This stuff really just keeps moisture out. It keeps things from oxidizing, rusting, all that stuff. So do not be afraid of this stuff. Well, that's where this video is going to end. Now, I know there were a few things that I didn't get to that I thought I might, but this is a 2-day fiasco. It's starting to get a little bit darker in the sky. It's already 2, 3 o'clock, and I do not want to do a whole nother day of working on this thing. Now we went through, like I said, there were a few things that didn't show, but we went through, we checked our tire pressures, we checked our transmission fluid, we checked our transfer case, we drained and refilled with new fluid both the front and the rear axle. We made a new diff cover gasket with RTB on the back. We checked our engine oil, we drained that, replaced it, and the filter. We checked our power steering fluid, which was still good, it was still clear. We checked our brake fluid, which is still good and still clear. We checked our air filter. Everything in this truck is now comfortably reliable for the winter that is coming up here. Now, that doesn't mean this thing is perfect. There are a few things here and there, like I said.
Alrighty, I'm going to record a little tidbit here. When I was explaining kind of what was going on with the odometer here, the wind noise is so loud that you couldn't hear me, but it is an extremely common on this era of trucks to have the digital odometer that tells you your total mileage on the car and your trips. They just go dark, they flicker, they're really dull, everything like that. I had planned to work on it in this video here, but like I said, it was a long ordeal. I was ready to hit the hay. I was ready to just be done working on this truck for now, and I do believe with how common of a issue it is, it should be its own dedicated video, so I do plan on doing that in the future.
And on top of that, there are a few little things here and there, like one of the license plates lights is fallen out. My little overhead dome light is burnt out. The digital odometer there. A few of the interior light bulbs are burnt out, like my ones on the climate controls. Now there are a few little piddly things like that, but quite frankly, I'm done with this thing for the weekend. It has robbed up my Friday, my Thursday afternoon, my Friday afternoon, and now most of my Saturday, and I am just completely done working on this thing. Tomorrow, I'm going to do more on the Chevy truck back there. I'm going to try to put brake lines on it, get that thing relatively ready to go. I need to do brake lines, need to finish up cleaning up the throttle body, then we can take that thing on a good drive and figure out what's what with that truck. Hope to see you guys in the next one. Peace out. Have a good one. Among Us.